Welcome, everyone, to our deep dive into some of the lesser-known influences behind Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Oh, this will be fun.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
Like when people think about Dracula, they typically think Transylvania, right?
Of course, yeah.
But Stoker never even visited Eastern Europe.
That's right.
So what if the real key to understanding this iconic vampire actually lies in Stoker's Irish background?
That's a really fascinating angle for sure. And it's definitely true that his background is completely steeped in Irish history and folklore.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit. What can you tell us about Stoker's life back in Ireland?
Well, just imagine being born in Dublin in 1847.
Okay.
Right in the peak of the Great Famine.
Wow.
Historian HANNAN really emphasizes this period just like really immense suffering and death, and it really shaped the atmosphere of like Stoker's upbringing.
I hadn't considered that, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, growing up surrounded by so much hardship and loss must have just left a real mark on him.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just that historical context, right? Stoker was also immersed in Irish folklore and mythology. You know, all those tales of fairies and spirits and the supernatural just passed down for generations.
Oh, yeah.
These stories were like, they were just so alive in the Ireland back then.
That's got to make for some chilling bedtime stories.
Oh, for sure.
Do you think there are any specific folk tales that may have directly influenced Dracula?
There's actually a really striking parallel with the legend of Abhartach. He was this blood-drinking dwarf.
Okay.
Like this evil, tyrannical, blood-drinking dwarf who could just rise from the grave.
Like Dracula?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
And he had to be killed with a yew stake and buried upside down.
To prevent him from coming back?
To prevent him from rising again, yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's
this legend.
Those are like...
some specific details.
Yeah, it's recorded in a book by Patrick Weston Joyce.
Okay.
And according to library records, Stoker actually researched this at Dublin's Marsh Library.
The yew stake, the upside-down burial, it's like a blueprint.
For defeating Dracula himself.
Exactly. And both Abhartach and Dracula, right, are these aristocratic figures who terrorize the countryside. They drink blood, they defy death, and they require like very specific methods to be destroyed.
It's like almost a prototype for Dracula.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this connection goes even beyond just these specific tales. Think about the overall atmosphere of Dracula. It's so bleak, desolate, and just filled with this like lurking dread.
Right.
That really echoes the landscape and the mood of Ireland during the famine.
Right. That sense of despair and the struggle for survival is just like palpable throughout the novel.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not just a monster story. You know, it's about confronting these powerful forces that just threaten to consume you.
And remember Stoker's mother, Charlotte.
Okay.
She was from County Sligo, and she likely shared all these haunting tales with him.
So it's almost like the seeds of Dracula were planted back in his childhood.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Speaking of Sligo, did Stoker draw any inspiration from real-life Irish locations?
There are a few contenders, for sure.
That's right.
But one that really stands out is Glasnevin Cemetery in Dublin.
Glasnevin Cemetery.
Yeah, it's got like this really distinctly Irish Gothic atmosphere.
I've been there, and it's genuinely chilling.
Oh, yeah.
The towering tombs, the overgrown pathways, and you can just feel the presence of the past there.
I know, it's like
stepping into Dracula.
Exactly. And Glasnevin's just one example.
Okay.
Ireland has so many cemeteries just scattered across the countryside, and they each have this like unique blend of beauty and decay.
It makes you wonder if Stoker ever wandered through these places, you know, just letting his imagination run wild.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely possible.
Yeah.
And it's really important to remember that Stoker wasn't working in a vacuum here, right?
Right.
He was part of this really vibrant Irish Gothic literary tradition.
That explored similar themes of darkness and the supernatural.
Exactly.
So he wasn't the first to delve into those shadowy depths.
Right.
Who were some of the other Irish Gothic writers who might have influenced him?
Well, there's Charles Maturin.
Okay.
His novel, Melmoth the Wanderer, tells this chilling tale of a man who makes a Faustian bargain.
Okay.
And is cursed to just wander the earth.
That definitely has strong Gothic vibes.
Right.
A cursed wanderer seeking redemption.
Yeah.
It feels like there's an echo of that in Dracula's restless existence.
Absolutely. And then there's Sheridan Le Fanu.
Okay, Sheridan Le Fanu.
He was another Irish writer who really had a huge impact on the genre.
What's interesting about Le Fanu?
His novella Carmilla.
Carmilla, okay.
It's this groundbreaking piece of vampire fiction that actually predates Dracula by 25 years.
A vampire story before Dracula?
Yeah.
That's news to me.
It features this seductive female vampire who preys on young women in in Central Europe,
Wow.
a setting that would later become really synonymous with Dracula.
Oh, wow.
Some scholars even believe that Carmilla was like a major influence on Dracula,
Interesting.
particularly in its portrayal of this manipulative and alluring vampire.
So Dracula is not just a Transylvanian tale, then it's deeply connected to this Irish literary lineage.
Exactly. And speaking of Irish lineage, if you're at all fascinated by these connections and want to explore more, I highly recommend checking out the Emerald Chronicle channel on YouTube.
Okay, I have to check it out.
They have this fantastic collection of videos on Irish history, myths, legends, and folklore.
That's a great resource. I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah.
Now, getting back to Stoker, how did his own career path influence his writing?
Well, after graduating from Trinity College in Dublin, Stoker worked as a theater critic for the Dublin Evening Mail.
Okay.
And here's where things get even more interesting.
Yep.
The paper was actually co-owned by none other than Sheridan Le Fanu.
No way!
Yeah, the author of Carmilla.
What are the odds?
It's remarkable, isn't it?
It really is.
It suggests that Stoker was already completely immersed in this world of Gothic horror and vampire lore well before he even conceived of Dracula.
It's like fate brought them together.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
But the theater connection goes even deeper. After moving to London,
Right.
Stoker became the business manager for the Lyceum Theatre,
Oh.
working with the legendary actor Henry Irving.
Wow.
So he was totally surrounded by this world of the stage, the dramatic and larger than life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this theatrical background is so evident in the structure of Dracula.
Oh, for sure.
The novel almost reads like a play,
Right.
with its dramatic dialogue, vivid descriptions, and that suspenseful pacing.
It really does.
Like those scenes are playing out on the stage in my mind.
Exactly. And remember, working at the Lyceum Theatre brought Stoker into contact with other literary giants of the Victorian era,
Okay.
like Arthur Conan Doyle and Oscar Wilde.
Wow. Talk about being in the right place at the right time.
Right. It was like a period of just immense creativity and intellectual ferment, and Stoker was right at the heart of it.
This is incredible. We've got Irish folklore, the Irish Gothic literary tradition, and a background in theater, all shaping Dracula in ways we never really consider.
It's a reminder that even the most famous and seemingly foreign tales often have roots way closer to home than we think.
Absolutely. But speaking of foreign, how did Transylvania become the setting for Dracula?
That's where Stoker's research at Marsh Library comes in.
Okay.
He was so fascinated by these mysterious tales and legends of Eastern Europe
All right.
and just devoured books on Transylvania, Romania, the Carpathian Mountains.
So he was piecing together a world from these texts.
Yeah, like creating this composite vampire landscape.
So I say,
Precisely, he borrowed books and maps. He delved into like the folklore and the history and geography of the region.
okay.
He even consulted with this Hungarian traveler and scholar Armin Vambury,
Okay.
who shared stories about Vlad the Impaler, the historical figure who inspired Dracula's name and reputation for cruelty.
So Vlad the Impaler, the real-life figure, lent his name to the fictional Count Dracula.
Exactly. Vlad the Impaler was this 15th century Wallachian prince
Wow.
who was known for his brutal methods of punishing his enemies,
Like,
particularly by impaling them on stakes. So his name and legend just became synonymous with like cruelty and terror, perfect inspiration for a Gothic horror novel.
it's amazing how Stoker blends history and folklore to create such an unforgettable villain.
Stoker was really a master at weaving together all these different threads of inspiration to create something that was wholly original and terrifying.
Yeah.
He really understood the power of myth and legend to tap into like our deepest fears.
This is all so fascinating, and to think all these Irish influences are swirling beneath the surface of this seemingly Transylvanian tale.
It really is a testament to the enduring power of folklore and how interconnected cultures can be.
Absolutely.
Even across vast geographical distances, stories can migrate, mutate, and find new life in unexpected ways.
And speaking of unexpected connections, I have to ask, didn't we read somewhere that there are real-life places in Ireland that might have inspired Stoker?
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
There's a spot on the western coast of Ireland in County Sligo called, called Carramore.
Carramore, isn't that an ancient megalithic cemetery?
It is, and a pretty eerie one, too.
Oh.
It's actually one of the largest and oldest cemeteries of its kind in all of Europe, dating back to the Neolithic period.
So we're talking thousands of years old.
Thousands of years.
Could this place have actually inspired Bram Stoker?
It's Definitely possible. Remember Stoker's mother was from Sligo?
Oh, right, yeah.
So he probably would have visited the area and known about Carramore.
Okay.
And this is where it gets really interesting.
Right.
Carramore is really known for its dolmens.
Dolmens.
You know those ancient stone tombs?
Okay, yeah.
And if you think about it, dolmens are basically just giant stone coffins.
You've just given me chills.
Right.
I mean, the image of those ancient dolmens is so eerily reminiscent of Dracula's crypt.
Right.
It makes you wonder if Stoker was either consciously or unconsciously drawing on these primal images of death and burial.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And let's not forget, Carramore itself is situated in a landscape that's both beautiful and desolate. You know, you've got rugged hills, windswept coastline, ancient ruins.
Right.
It has that same eerie, otherworldly atmosphere that just pervades Dracula.
It's like a landscape sculpted by these ancient forces.
Yes.
Imbued with a sense of mystery and the supernatural.
Absolutely.
You can almost feel the weight of history there.
Exactly. It's not hard to imagine how this environment could have really just sparked Stoker's imagination and fed into the creation of Dracula.
So we've got this ancient cemetery with giant stone coffins, a connection to Stoker's family, and a landscape that practically screams Gothic horror. It's like all the pieces fit together to create this breeding ground for dark inspiration.
It really does, doesn't it? And speaking of pieces fitting together, we can't forget about the historical context of Dracula, too.
Right.
The novel isn't just a horror story. It's
Right.
also a reflection of all the anxieties and uncertainties of the Victorian era.
Okay, so what were some of those anxieties that really permeated Victorian society?
Well, the late 19th century was a time of such rapid social and technological change.
Okay.
There were anxieties about disease and contagion, fears of social upheaval, and a growing sense of unease about the place of Britain in the world.
So how do those anxieties actually manifest in Dracula?
Well, think about it. Dracula, this ancient foreign figure,
Right.
represents this threat to the established order.
Okay.
He's like the symbol of the things that Victorian society just feared the most.
Right.
Disease, immorality, the loss of control.
Oh.
He's like a plague infecting those he comes into contact with.
And remember, Stoker was writing Dracula at a time when Britain was really grappling with its colonial legacy.
That's right.
The empire was vast, but it was also showing signs of strain.
Exactly. You could argue that Dracula, as this powerful invading force,
Okay.
represents the threat of the colonized other striking back at the heart of the empire.
That's interesting.
He's a figure who embodies both fascination and fear,
Right.
like a reminder of the potential consequences of imperial ambition.
I'm really struck by how Dracula functions as a mirror, reflecting all these anxieties of Victorian society.
It's true.
It's a reminder that even the most fantastical stories can be so deeply rooted in the real world.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about the theme of blood, too.
Right. Blood.
Blood transfusions were actually like this new and controversial medical procedure at the time.
Yeah.
And there were all these anxieties about the mixing of blood and the potential for contamination.
So in Dracula, blood is both a source of life and a means of spreading evil.
That's right.
It's this really powerful symbol,
It is.
representing both our primal instincts and our deepest fears.
Yeah,
It highlights this fragility of life and the ever-present threat of corruption.
exactly. And the fact that Dracula can only survive by drinking the blood of others reinforces this idea of like a parasitic relationship,
Right.
both literally and metaphorically.
It's almost as if he's feeding on the life force of the society he invades.
That's a very insightful observation.
Thank you.
And there's one more Irish element we haven't touched on yet.
Okay, what's that?
The role of the Catholic Church.
Right. The church plays a pretty significant role in fighting off Dracula and his evil forces.
Exactly. And remember, Stoker was a Protestant writing during a time of growing Catholic power in Ireland.
Okay.
The Catholic Church represented this force that was both familiar and foreign, powerful, and potentially subversive.
So you're saying that the portrayal of the church in Dracula might actually reflect some of those religious tensions in Ireland at the time.
It's certainly a possibility the way that the church is both a source of strength and a target of Dracula's attacks.
Right.
Suggests this complex and maybe even ambivalent view of religious power.
And there's that theme of contamination again.
Right.
Dracula trying to taint the purity of the church with his evil.
Exactly. And of course, the church ultimately triumphs over Dracula,
Right.
which maybe reflects this desire for spiritual order and stability in the face of all those social and cultural anxieties we talked about earlier.
It's fascinating how Stoker weaves together all these different threads. Irish history, religious tensions, Victorian anxieties to create a story that resonates on so many levels.
It really speaks to his skill as a writer,
Yeah.
his ability to just tap into the collective unconscious and create this narrative that speaks to our deepest fears and desires.
Absolutely. And speaking of fears and desires, we have to talk about the literary legacy of Dracula.
Of course.
Its influence on countless other vampire stories, films, TV shows. It's hard to imagine the world of horror without it.
It's true. Dracula essentially created the modern vampire myth, and its influence is still felt today, from Bela Lugosi's iconic portrayal on stage and screen to the countless vampire movies and TV shows that have followed.
It's amazing how this one novel has shaped our cultural understanding of vampires.
Right.
It's become this touchstone for exploring themes of immortality, desire, and the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of human nature.
And it's not just about vampires. Dracula's influence can be seen in all sorts of horror fiction, from Gothic novels to psychological thrillers to modern-day zombie apocalypses.
Wow.
It's a story that taps into our primal fears about death, disease, and the loss of control.
Yeah.
Fears that are as relevant today as they were in Stoker's time.
And let's not forget the enduring fascination with the character of Dracula himself.
Oh, of course.
That charismatic yet terrifying figure.
Right?
Who embodies both our desires and our fears.
He's such a complex and compelling villain, and perhaps that's why he's remained so popular over the years.
Yeah.
He's a reminder of the darkness that lurks within us all and the seductive power of evil.
It's remarkable to think that all of this, the vampires, the horror, the cultural anxieties, the enduring fascination, might have been sparked by just a handful of Irish folktales and a childhood steeped in Irish history and landscape.
It really is a testament to the power of stories to travel across time and space, to shape our imaginations and to continue to haunt us long after we've closed the book. And speaking of stories, if you're enjoying this exploration of Irish folklore and its influence on literature, I highly recommend checking out the Emerald Chronicle channel on YouTube.
Okay.
They have this treasure trove of tales and insights that'll keep you captivated for hours.
That's a great suggestion. They do a fantastic job of bringing Irish folklore to life. Now, getting back to Stoker, we're about to explore one more specific aspect of his life.
Right.
That sheds light on his creative process.
Yes, we were going to talk about Stoker's fascination with the occult.
Ooh, that's intriguing. It adds like a whole new dimension to our understanding of Dracula. What can you tell us about Stoker's beliefs and how they might have influenced his writing?
Well, the Victorian era was just this time of immense interest in spiritualism, theosophy, all these other esoteric traditions.
Okay.
People were fascinated by communicating with the dead, exploring hidden realms, and tapping into unseen forces.
So seances, mediums, attempting to pierce the veil between the living and the dead.
Exactly. And Stoker was definitely drawn to these ideas. He attended seances, he read books on the occult,
Okay.
and even incorporated some of these beliefs and practices into his writing.
I can see how those interests could have fed into the supernatural elements of Dracula.
Yeah.
It's not just a vampire story. It's a story that explores the boundaries of what we perceive as real.
Right. The novel's just full of occult symbols and imagery. Vampires themselves are often seen as creatures of the occult.
Right.
And there are all these references to rituals and curses and ancient lore.
Okay.
It's as if Stoker is drawing on both folklore and occult traditions to create a world where the lines between the natural and the supernatural are blurred.
It's fascinating how he blends those elements together.
Yeah.
It's not just about scaring the reader, it's about unsettling them,
Right.
making them question what they believe.
Yeah, and let's not forget about the themes of life and death and resurrection that are so central to Dracula.
Right.
Those are also really common themes in occult beliefs.
Okay.
The idea that death is not the end, that there are these forces beyond our understanding that can manipulate life and death. It's a very powerful and enduring concept,
Yeah.
and one that Stoker explores in a very visceral way.
It's like he's tapping into our deepest fears about mortality,
Yes.
our anxieties about what lies beyond the grave. It's no wonder that Dracula has had such a lasting impact on our culture. It speaks to something primal within us.
Absolutely, and this exploration of the occult adds another layer to the Irish influences we've already discussed. It's like Stoker is weaving together these different strands of Irish culture, folklore, history, religion, even esoteric beliefs, to create this tapestry of horror that is both uniquely Irish and universally resonant.
It's remarkable how all of these influences converge in Dracula. It's a testament to Stoker's genius that he was able to synthesize these diverse elements into such a cohesive and compelling narrative.
It's a story that continues to fascinate and terrify readers over a century later, and I think that's because it taps into something really deep within us. Our fears of the unknown, our anxieties about the fragility of life, our fascination with the darkness that lies beneath the surface of things.
This deep dive has been so enlightening. We've uncovered so many layers of meaning and influence, from the impact of the Great Famine to the haunting landscapes of Ireland to the chilling allure of the occult.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
I feel like it's truly expanded my understanding of Dracula and its enduring power.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even the most familiar stories can hold these hidden depths just waiting to be discovered.
And speaking of discoveries, for our listeners who are eager to delve deeper into the world of Irish folklore and history, I highly recommend checking out the Emerald Chronicle channel on YouTube.
That's a great suggestion.
They have this fantastic collection of videos that explore the myths, legends, historical events that have really shaped Irish culture. You might even find some more clues to the origins of Dracula lurking there.
They do a wonderful job of bringing Irish history and folklore to life.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the Irish influences on Dracula. It's been a fascinating journey, and I hope it's given you a new appreciation for the depth and complexity of this iconic work of horror literature.
I think it's safe to say that Dracula is much more than just a vampire story,
Yeah.
It's a reflection of its time, a product of its creator's unique background and experiences, and a testament to the enduring power of stories to connect us across cultures and generations.
And a huge thank you to Irish historian Jerry HANNAN for his meticulous research on Bram Stoker and his Irish roots. His work has been invaluable in illuminating the hidden connections that have enriched our understanding of Dracula.
Absolutely. His dedication to uncovering the historical context and cultural influences behind this literary masterpiece has just opened up these new avenues of interpretation and appreciation.
And to all of you listening, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep uncovering the hidden layers of the stories that shape our world. Until next time, happy reading.